The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the original series episode, Shore Leave.
Surely not.
Surely you must be joking. I'm not joking, and stop calling me Shirley. Joining me today on the panel is Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Father Corey's on assignment. He's on a mission, not a 5-year mission, I hope, but he'll be back with us next time. Folks, be sure to share the podcast with your friends to help us grow our community of listeners and reach more people. We love how the show is growing, and you can help us continue that. Also want to plug another show on the StarQuest Network that you will definitely enjoy called Pray Station Portable. You look for it wherever podcasts are found. Pray Station Portable, not PlayStation, Pray Station. It's a pun. It is the Liturgy of the Hours or the Divine Office of the Catholic Church, and it's a nice way to pray throughout the day in very short segments. And it's one of the oldest podcasts around. It's been around for over a dozen years at this point, and it is a great podcast.
It's one of the oldest forms of Christian prayer, too.
It is. It's excellent. It's even older than the Rosary. So I love praying it with my kids, and they really do a good job with it. In fact, have memorized large sections of it, which is awesome. So check that out, Pray Station Portable. But today we're actually talking about an original series episode, Shore Leave. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what this episode's about?
This week on Fantasy Island, the crew is desperately in need of shore leave, and they beam down to a planet that turns out to be a giant telepathic holodeck with the safeties turned off. Without realizing it, they start thinking about things which they then encounter. Some of the things are pleasant, but some are unpleasant and dangerous. They also progressively start suffering from tech malfunctions, and they lose contact with the ship. It's all relatively fun and games until Dr. McCoy gets himself killed, believing that a knight in shining armor is just an illusion that can't hurt him, and that leaves him defenseless in a fatal jousting encounter. Eventually, however, Mr. Rourke steps out from behind some trees and says that his people have only just realized that the Enterprise crew didn't understand that they had beamed down to involuntary Disneyland. And the people who got killed, including Dr. McCoy, are really alive after all. Kirk then approves the shore leave that the crew is in desperate need of, so everybody gets to beam down and live whatever fantasy they want, presumably after they satisfy themselves that the planet has strong privacy laws so that whatever happens in Space Vegas stays in Space Vegas.
I think Risa might be a better choice for shore leave, but maybe they haven't discovered it yet. So, yeah, that's actually a really good summary. Apparently the original script of this had to be rewritten because Roddenberry thought it was too much.
Twice,
right?
Well, we should mention how they got the original, because this is first season Star Trek, and early on, I mean, even after they had the pilots, but before they had the as they were developing the series, the first season, Roddenberry wanted to bring in professional science fiction writers. He didn't want just guys who were writing cop shows or cowboy shows, most of whom didn't understand science fiction. He wanted actual science fiction authors, which would lend prestige to the show and give them better scripts. And so they went to people like Harlan Ellison, which got us City on the Edge of Forever. Mm-hmm. And they went to Theodore Sturgeon, who is another very famous science fiction author of the period, who loved writing for Star Trek. He ended up writing more than one episode. He later, in second season, will write Amok Time, where we learn all about Spock's Vulcan mating rituals and stuff. Mm-hmm. But this is his first script, and he was just delighted to have written for Star Trek, even though they completely rewrote his script. And so he originally wrote one that had a bunch of fantasy elements in it. And then Roddenberry or the network were concerned about maybe this is too much fantasy, so it needs to be toned down. And Roddenberry was like going on a trip or something. And so he let co-producer Gene Kuhn rewrite it. But Gene Kuhn didn't understand the mandate and amped up the fantasy elements. So when Roddenberry gets back, it's even more fantastic than fantastic, and he has to urgently rewrite it on set. So they
they're filming.
As they're filming, they've set up a card table and a typewriter for him, and he's banging out rewritten pages, trying to keep ahead of the cameras.
And wasn't completely successful because they had a 7th day of filming. They usually did it in 6 days, so they had a 7th day of filming for it. So yeah, it's interesting. It was also filmed like almost everything. There's very little on the ship. Almost everything is filmed on location in these 2 locations. A place called Africa, USA, and Vasquez Rocks.
Right. Yeah. Africa, USA was a safari park, and they filmed other TV shows there, including Daktari, which was another famous show of the period set in Africa. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they've also got Vasquez Rocks in it, which is the place where Kirk fights the Gorn, and it shows up in a bunch of early Star Trek episodes.
And most recently in the Picard series, as we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
Vasquez Rocks is kind of like the Wilhelm scream. It just keeps showing up.
It's in everything. Anything filmed out in Los Angeles is probably going to have Vasquez Rocks in it.
And when you go visit it, as I have, be sure you're wearing good footwear because they have warning signs up for rattlesnakes.
Yes. Not so much tigers, I'm going to guess, but definitely rattlesnakes. So in the story itself, there's an opening teaser, and it is there's this funny moment. I just thought it was it sort of sets the stage for this. There's quite a few comedic moments in this episode, along with the drama, where Kirk has got this knot in his back while he's sitting in the captain's chair, and he's like, oh, and he thinks Spock is massaging this kink in his back, which would be kind of weird.
Oh.
And it turns out to be the yeoman is doing it, and Kirk is embarrassed by her massaging his back, and not his first officer, the Vulcan, which was kind of funny. It was very strange.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't pick up on that. I just thought, oh, I'm guessing you're right. What I thought is, okay, he's having the yeoman massage the knot in his back, and then he's embarrassed when Spock notices this is happening.
Right.
But okay. Yeah. Either way you go, I mean, I guess you can argue which way it would be more embarrassing for him.
Right. Now, speaking of
because there are situations, where it's like, okay, man to man, you get to do this, but I wouldn't want a woman doing it.
Right. Especially his yeoman who is his underling and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And speaking of the yeoman, I have to say, Yeoman Barrows, I think is her name. She kind of fits in with the 1960s era roles that women, like the general roles that women are in. She ends up being a damsel in distress and is all about the clothes at one point when she's a princess dress. But is much more agency and independence and than a lot of the female actresses have had, apart from Uhura, because she's always she's always
Janice Rand.
A little more, yeah.
I mean, Janice Rand is like, okay, the power's out. I used a phaser to heat up the coffee.
Right. But Yeoman Barrows, I felt like I really liked the character. I'm kind of sad that they didn't continue it. Now, Janice has already left the series at this point. So,
well, I'm not sure about the production order, but originally this part was written for Janice Rand. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that they wanted Janice Rand not to continue was so that Kirk would have an open field of people to romance, the girl in every port. But this episode would have solved that because Yeoman Barrows is starting a relationship with Dr. McCoy in this episode.
Which is another interesting element that they abandoned as well.
Yeah, but if they had kept Janice Rand, it's like, okay, she's interested in McCoy, not Kirk. Kirk can romance whatever space woman he wants.
The next green-skinned alien gladiator that comes along can romance.
Or green-haired from the Gamesters of Triskelion.
Right. That's So I liked that character. In fact, they had quite a number of secondary characters. The Sulu gets a lot to do in this one, which I'm happy with. But there's also the 2 others, Rodriguez and Teller. Yeah,
I forget her, or maybe it's Keller, but I forget her name. But we've actually seen her before. She is in the first Romulan episode. She's the one who's about to get married, whose husband is killed.
Yes, that's right. And now she's with this Rodriguez, they're a survey team that it has some adventures. So it's it's very interesting to see the breadth of this and how they filmed on location, all that stuff. This is a very ambitious episode.
So they say that this planet has no animals, no people. It's got plants, but that's it.
Yeah.
And they've sent down scouting parties to investigate. So like Rodriguez and the woman are one team, and McCoy and Sulu are another team.
Yep.
And Sulu, interestingly, is taking an interest, especially in the plant life and wanting to do cellular studies and stuff. And that continues the character trait they've already established for him in the Salt Vampire episode of being the man trap, of being a botanist.
Yes.
Because he's like got a whole botany bay right there on the Enterprise that he works in.
Botany Bay?
Yeah.
So, yes.
But also, kudos actually surveying a planet before you approve mass beam downs. Good. Yes.
Good idea. Apparently that was they very clearly worked out in this case. McCoy makes this offhand remark about it being something out of Alice in Wonderland, and then as soon as Sulu's got his back turned,
he has to say because they need to get the plot moving. It's nothing like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing about Alice in Wonderland that was wondrous was not the trees,
the park-like environment. Yeah. But that's when he sees the white rabbit and the little girl Alice come running through.
Yeah, and we should fair is fair. We often criticize the American accents on Doctor Who. Uh-huh. So let's criticize the British accent on this little girl in Star Trek. She is clearly someone from California who has been sort of coached in how to say her lines in a British accent, but it is not.
It is not a good accent. So the doctor, I think at first McCoy's like, I'm way too tired. I'm seeing things. So he's kind of dismisses it. Then we have a scene where Kirk is not going to go on the shore leave, and I have to stay on the ship because I get stuff to do. And it's Spock who manipulates him into going on shore leave, which I really enjoy this. He is like, we have a crew member who's clearly suffering from this and that, and they say they're too important, but and
the doctor's medical logs show that this person is in desperate need of rest and recuperation, but he's refusing to do it.
Yeah, he's becoming irritable and quarrelsome. And so the Kirk's like, hey, your right ends with the safety of the ship begins. That guy's got to go on shore on my orders. What's his name? James Kirk.
Yeah.
So it's like he has to go. So I really like that.
That's a good moment.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to comment on the park-like nature of this. Mm-hmm. Now, actually, you look at this on screen and it's like, okay, this is clearly a safari park, but if you look in the background, you see the dry California hills. Right. That's just like all of a sudden the trees stop there and it gets taken over by desert chaparral.
Right.
And even within the park, it's like, oh, someone has just taken a lawnmower here, but they haven't gone all the way up to the edge. So the illusion isn't complete. But what I wanted to point out is notice that it's a park-like environment that appeals to humans. And this is actually rooted in our evolution because our ancestors grew up in African grasslands. And so our ideal environment and the one that we're subconsciously attracted to is not Arctic tundra or desert or, ocean tide pool. It's an area that's flattish and has grass, but also some trees and a source of water. And we recreate that every chance we can.
Including in our yards.
Including in our yards. That's the ideal backyard. It's also the ideal park, and just humans, whenever they can, they create for themselves a park-like environment that has flowing grass, some trees, and a water source.
It's like you just described like every episode of HGTV home renovation.
Yeah.
That's true. That is very true. So I want to talk about like the various wish fulfillment episodes that happen in this story. So we have Sulu. We also find out about Sulu, in addition to being a botanist, he's apparently a gun collector.
Yeah, and we know he's has an interest in weapons from other episodes, like when he does fencing and stuff.
Right.
When they're all space drunk.
Yes, I love that episode. So when the planet gives him a mint condition police special 38 from the 20th century, and I love how
slug thrower.
He explains to how it fires lead bullets because again
metal pellets propelled by expanding gases from an explosion.
Yes, because 200 some odd 300 years in the future, no one's gonna know how guns work anymore. Kirk gets a chance to have revenge on his Academy bully Finnegan, which I love that character. It's just kind of a fun leprechaun sort of character.
So Finnegan, I mean, I remember watching this episode as a kid, and I hadn't seen it in a number of years, and I always hated Finnegan. Because he's this Irish stereotype. And I know people from Ireland, and they have never fit this stereotype that you will see on 1960s television. I mean, they're like, I've always found Irish stereotypes on TV and how comically overblown they are really uncomfortable. I mean, I'm prepared to acknowledge stereotypes are usually based in something, but then they exaggerate it. And I've never felt comfortable even when I was a kid and didn't know anyone from Ireland, I've never felt comfortable with Irish stereotypes. But on rewatching it, Finnegan's not as bad as I remembered.
Yeah.
It's more complex. It's not as broad. He's not as bad as the O'Reilly singing when they're all Irish things, when they're all space drunk. Yes. I really hate that.
Yeah.
So this was not as bad as I remember. I also like that because he's an upperclassman in the Academy, we get our first glimpse here of the Academy uniform. Mm-hmm. And like the later Academy uniforms, that they will bring out in the DS9 and TNG era, the dominant accent color in addition to like the black pants, but the accent color on the Academy uniform is gray.
Yeah, that's true. Sparkly gray, but
in this case, yeah.
Yes. The actor who plays Finnegan is nowhere near 20 years old. The guy is older than 20. But we get expansion of this character in Kirk's real experience in the book Autobiography of James T. Kirk, which I've read, which is a lot of fun. And so they actually give us a lot more about his encounters with Finnegan. And so we have Finnegan, we have Yeoman Barrows is attacked by Don Juan at one point, which is
and this is a
weird.
It's a little uncomfortable in some respects from a modern perspective, because he has not just shown up and tried to sweep her off her feet. He's shown up and torn her uniform.
Yeah.
So she's been attacked. And right. Sulu chased him off. And that suggests that this is playing into the women have rape fantasies meme that has at times been supposed.
Yeah. So a little uncomfortable it's really showing his age in that case. And then we also have another where Kirk sees his old flame Ruth, this woman that he apparently dated. What he said, 15 years since he'd seen her? So that would have to be just after the Academy, because Kirk at this point is in his mid-30s. So it's when he was still pretty young.
Or during the Academy.
Yeah, which makes it really uncomfortable, because then Ruth, this character, would be like 20 to his 35. And so it'd be, it's a little bit, summer and winter sort of relationship going on there.
Well, it's not that far. It's more like late spring and early spring.
Okay.
but the actress here also is clearly not 20 years old. Although he says you haven't aged. Maybe he had a thing for older women when he was in the Academy.
That's entirely, knowing what we know of Jim Kirk, that's probably entirely possible.
The thing I thought was a missed opportunity here is that this is not Carol Marcus.
Yep. Yeah.
And they could have easily, I mean, she's even blonde, and we don't learn anything about her background. She could be a scientist. So when writing Wrath of Khan, they could have just made it Ruth Marcus instead of Carol Marcus, and it would have been this character. And it would have been consistent with, because she's portrayed as like, this is the first woman Kirk thinks of, as a romantic possibility from his past.
Yeah, that is a missed opportunity, because when you're writing Wrath of Khan, you really should dig into what has already been established and make that connection.
Well, and they did. They just couldn't make this connection.
Yeah.
Also, at this point in the episode, which is still fairly early on, and I'd been thinking this even before, but this had like clinched it for me. There is some kind of chemical in the air on this planet that is making them all blind to how weird all this is. I mean, they're acknowledging how weird it is verbally, but they're not acting like it's as weird. They are not behaving as defensively as they should. There's something that's relaxing them and making them go along with this.
Yeah, Kirk is acting, even at this point, acting kind of like almost like drunk or drugged in his responses. It's like, that's not just infatuation for Ruth. There's something that's like, you would clearly, if you were in your right mind, say, well, this obviously cannot be the real Ruth. So something is going on here, but he's like, nope.
Yeah. And he's like, how can you possibly be here? But he's not questioning that it is her.
Right.
He's questioning how it can be her.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's the moment where McCoy and Yeoman Barrows have some romantic flirting and back and forth, and she finds the princess dress, and he's like, "Sure, go ahead, take your uniform off and put on the princess dress. Sure, why not?" Again, not using good judgment in either case here.
Well, I mean, they could have pointed out your actual uniform is a wreck because of what Don Juan did to it, but.
True.
although waltzing around with the big pointy hat and the veil is not really practical.
Right.
I do like the line here where it's like when she agrees to put the dress on, she's like going to go behind some bamboo or something and is like, "Don't peek." And, "Madam, I am a physician. When I peek, it is strictly in the line of duty."
I know, that was a great one. I might have been saving that for later, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No, it is a great line. Rodriguez and Teller, meanwhile, are being menaced by a tiger. Not sure that we don't get an explanation of why there's a tiger. And for some reason, they have forgotten that they're carrying phasers to defend themselves.
They start to have tech failures in this, like when Sulu tries to use his phaser, it immediately fails.
Right. But at this point, we haven't had that. So, or maybe off screen they've tried and it didn't work. But I noticed that. The planet is draining the energy from their technology and interfering with communications. We don't get an explanation why.
No, they never give us a good explanation for that. So it's simply for plot convenience.
Yeah. McCoy, we have that whole thing with McCoy thinks the Black Knight on horseback. Now, Kirk and Spock, who's beamed down at this point and left the ship without its captain or first officer, which is par for the course for.
That's okay. Scotty, who doesn't appear in this episode, can be in command.
That's right. So they've figured out that the safeties are off, quote unquote. McCoy has not yet. And so he thinks that the Black Knight is a hallucination and takes a lance in the chest while he's standing there. You don't, obviously in the 60s, you don't see anything graphic, but it is pretty dramatic moment when you're a kid watching this.
Yeah, and it's nice for once for people to be wrong on the desperate bet that this is just an illusion or something, and it's all going to be okay. I mean, people are always taking insane risks thinking it's going to be okay in shows like this. I mean, you got a giant Statue of Liberty weeping angel on your tail, just jump off the building and you'll survive. It'll be okay. Time will reset.
Yes, referring to an episode of Doctor Who we've talked about recently. So, and then we have, and McCoy is dead. As far as if you're watching this for the first time, McCoy is dead. And it's dramatic, given how often different characters escape death at the last second. And you might think, wow, they've killed off this character.
Kirk is so moved by McCoy's death, he actually does a Captain's Log supplemental about it.
So at some point, he walks away from the body and opens his communicator and records his Captain's Log sentimental. That's one of the things I've realized in my current rewatch of these episodes is how often we have these Captain's Logs that appear out of nowhere somehow in the midst of action.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Which reveals their purpose is to update the people who just came in during the commercial break.
Right.
And not really would anyone practically take a moment to record this right now.
Yes. If you've forgotten while you went out to get some more chips, here's what's going on. So they are fascinated by the fact that the knight is some kind of mechanical contrivance
made out of plant matter.
Yes, you mean a robot? Like they don't come out and say robot,
but he's a plant robot.
Yes, which is actually kind of cool. Actually, it's the same cellular material, and in fact, everything on the planet is made from this same manufactured material in fake.
Yeah. We also have a samurai that chases Sulu. And we have like a World War II group of planes that strafe Rodriguez and Teller. And actually, if you look, it looks like Teller is hit and dies.
Yeah.
But they then don't make any, they don't follow up on that. So apparently she gets brought back from underground just like Dr. McCoy.
Right. They were Zeros, I think, Japanese Zeros. Yeah.
Also, later, Spock lets his thoughts get away from him because he's talking about how we must all control our thoughts, just like in Where No One Has Gone Before.
Yes.
And it's like, that's going to work. And he and he thinks of the tiger again.
We have to control our thoughts because we don't want that tiger showing up again.
Yeah. If someone thought of the tiger, oops, and there it is. And although this time you can actually see it's on a chain.
Yeah.
It's like tied to a peg in the ground. So it's not gonna hurt our actors.
Yes, we do not want to release a tiger anywhere near our stars. And then there's an extended scene of Kirk chasing down Finnegan and beating him to a pulp, like he's a leprechaun in a pot of gold.
I like in this scene, like he's demanding at this point that Finnegan give him answers, and Finnegan, they've just been beating on each other, and they're both really tired and injured, and he says, I want answers. And Finnegan takes a handful of dirt and throws it in Kirk's face and says, earn them. And the fight is on again.
That was good. So Kirk gets back to the glade, the park. He's got Sulu, Rodriguez, and Barrows, and he makes them stand at attention and tells them, don't ask any questions.
Being at attention.
Yes, don't talk, don't breathe, don't think. And it's like, I'm not sure that works the way you think. And that's when Mr. Rourke comes out to tell them, you've ruined our, well, not ruined, but we've just realized you don't understand that this is all for fun.
Yeah, and he wants to sell them some fine Corinthian leather.
And he explains that, they're an advanced race and they use the park as a play place. And so one of them says, that seems weird. Why? It's such an advanced race. Why would you do that?
Sulu says that it's like you're so advanced and you still need to play. And Kirk says the more advanced the mind, the greater the need for play. And Mr. Rourke, because we never learn his name, he's just called the Caretaker. Yeah, but we're calling him Mr. Rourke because Mr. Rourke was the maitre d' of Fantasy Island.
Yes,
if you've never seen that show, it's very similar to this in some ways.
Played by Khan.
All played by Ricardo Montalban. Yeah.
Yes.
And this Caretaker is not Ricardo Montalban, but the role is like, okay, you go to Fantasy Island to work out your issues through living a fantasy.
Yes.
Including like beating up the upperclassmen who tortured you in the academy. I mean, that would be that would be a Fantasy Island type plot.
It would.
But so the Caretaker agrees. Yeah, the more advanced the mind, the greater the need for play. So I guess that explains Mr. Spock.
Right.
None taken, Captain. Just standing right here.
Yeah. Well, he says earlier that he doesn't need to play. So that was kind of interesting. So they kind of a counterpoint to that. Mm-hmm. The actor who plays the Caretaker is Oliver McGowan, who shows up a lot in a lot of different guest appearances and things. So, and also Spock has to explain to us what an amusement park is, because apparently they don't have amusement parks in the 22nd century or 23rd
that's okay.
Century.
They have. He should just say it's a low-tech holodeck, Captain.
Right. Because so they decide. Oh well, now that McCoy shows up with two showgirls on either arm.
Yeah, and notice they've each got, so one of them's like wearing a kind of pink costume and one of them's wearing a yellow costume, and they look like Vegas showgirls.
Yeah,
and look at their belly buttons. They've each got a little bead that is appropriately colored it's color coordinated with the rest of their costume. They got a little bead in their belly button. And this is because in the 1960s on television, the censors would not let women show their belly buttons. And so this is the Star Trek way around that. You just put a bead in it.
Which, letter of the law, but not really the spirit of the law, I guess.
No, yeah. And so, like, this was a big issue on I Dream of Jeannie, because Barbara Eden's wearing this Jeannie costume, and they had to find a way to make it cover her belly button, except when they had wardrobe failures.
Right. Yeah. So Yeoman Barros gets jealous and
I'm like, hey, you thought of Don Juan.
right.
Who's having stray romantic thoughts here?
Double standards. Standards. Well, Don Juan and the Black Knight. I mean, a little of both.
True, both. Yeah. Well, okay, so now we're even. You had Don Juan and the Black Knight. I have the two space showgirls.
So we end things where they decide to commence transporting shore leave parties down. Tell them to prepare for the best shore leave they've had, says Kirk.
Although Mr. Rourke says that they need to take the appropriate precautions.
Yes,
it's like, okay, which would be...
Yeah, don't think of deadly things. Yeah. Maybe you could make things less deadly. That would be the thing. Kirk is going to go back to the ship and take to things, but then he sees Ruth walking toward them and then decides to stay for a day or two. I'm uncomfortable with this a little bit because that's not really the woman Ruth.
No, yeah.
The ethics of this feel a little icky.
Oh,
it's like holodeck stuff.
This is this is a giant telepathic holodeck.
Yeah.
And there's lots of activity that is implied to be occurring off screen that they could not show on screen for good reason in the 1960s.
Yeah. Even if that stuff
even couldn't show today without warnings all over everything.
But even if we say, okay, that didn't happen, that stuff. But even if he's just spending a day or two in the company of his old flame, Ruth, it's really not Ruth. And it just feels uncomfortable. Like, I wouldn't want to think about an ex-girlfriend from 15 years ago spending the day with a facsimile of me. That just feels weird.
So let me think about this from a somewhat different perspective.
Okay.
So I'm a widower, and I have not seen my wife alive in almost 30 years. And in that amount, which is twice how long it's been since Kirk has seen Ruth.
Yeah.
And she wasn't his wife, but she was obviously someone very important to him. There are things after 30 years, there are things you forget. It's like, I know Renee had certain mannerisms and certain vocal inflections, but I just can't quite pull them up. And I just can't consciously retrieve them. But I remember the feel of the rhythm of her voice, and I remember the feel of the way she used her facial muscles, but I can't remember the details. And if someone said, "Oh, we can probe your subconscious and give you an illusion of a living Renee so you can re-experience all those little things about her that you can't consciously pull up," I would take it. I just to be able to revivify my memories, and make them clearer and sharper. And I don't know that I would need a day or two to do that. And nothing else would happen, which I think Jim Kirk has some different ethical standards than I do in that regard.
Right.
But in principle, I could see spending some time with a facsimile of a long-lost loved one just to help you feel and remember some of the things about that person that have been lost at this point.
I wonder if it's different if it's someone who has died that you've loved versus someone who...
There is a relevant difference there, because he could always just get on FaceTime and talk to Ruth over subspace. Right.
And presumably the relationship broke up. Like she's moved on with her life and she's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Possibly. As opposed to It could be like with if you have a parent who's died, or a beloved grandparent or something like that. I could see that doing that.
And same thing. Exactly. Parents, grandparents, other people you've lost. I'd be willing to spend time with a facsimile, knowing it's a facsimile, but just to remember and sort of replenish my memories and my feelings.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. Yeah, that I have no problem with. It's the it's the ex-girlfriend thing.
Yeah,
which is a little weird, and of course the implied whatever. But anyway, as we end, we have this laughing on the bridge scene.
This is the classic ending where Spock, they're all coming back from their shore leaves. Spock has been minding the store. And he's like, "Did you enjoy your shore leaves, gentlemen?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And he's like, "Most illogical. Ha, ha, ha." And then we have the clarinet of humor.
Yeah, right. Wah, wah, wah. And then we like this weird, uncomfortable, like extended laughing as he says it head warp back to Wanusulu. It's like, what are you laughing at? Like, I don't understand.
It's not that funny, dude.
Yeah. But we have to end on something. But in general, I really liked this episode. It was a good story. I thought it was different from a lot of other first season stories.
It certainly came out. Better than a lot of episodes that underwent 2 rewrites did.
Yeah,
and last minute rewrites. And Theodore Sturgeon, apparently he wasn't too ego invested in the script. He didn't mind the fact they changed it around. He was just delighted to have a Star Trek writing credit, and he came back and did more.
Yeah.
Whereas Harlan Ellison got a rewrite, and it's like,
oh yeah,
ooh, scorched earth.
right. He's never again. But it was nice to see that the on location shooting, and it was some new stuff. It was different. It wasn't clearly on a sound stage with foam rubber rocks and all that sort of stuff. So that was good.
It was clearly on a manicured lawn with imperfect lawn mowing.
Right, but at least it was real grass. So, Jimmy, any final notes from you on this episode?
Nope.
Okay. All right, let's wrap things up then. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Matthew B., Joshua N., Paula W., Silas H., and Kelsey S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week.
Yeah.
That's it from us. So you can let us know what you thought of Shore Leave, this original series episode. You can do so by commenting at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the animated series episode, The Infinite Vulcan. Yes, giant Spocks.
Oh, boy.
Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
At least it has plant people in it.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, my dear girl, I am a doctor. When I peek, it is in the line of duty.